A kind waitress paid for an old man's coffee, never knowing he was a billionaire looking for his future wife. The downtown cafe buzzed with morning activity as rain pattered against the large windows. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of rain-soaked pavement. The door swung open, allowing a gust of chilly air to sweep through. A man in his early 50s stepped inside, his threadbare coat dripping with rain, his scuffed shoes leaving faint prints on the polished floor. His salt and pepper hair was damp, clinging to his forehead, and his eyes held a weariness that spoke of hardships endured. He approached the counter hesitantly, his gaze flickering over the menu before settling on the young barista behind the register. With a voice barely above a whisper, he requested a simple black coffee. As the barista rang up the order, the man reached into his pockets, his movements growing increasingly frantic as he searched for his wallet. His face paled and he swallowed hard before speaking, his voice tinged with embarrassment. I'm sorry," he stammered. "I must have left my wallet at home. If it's all right, could I just sit here for a while until the rain lets up?" The barista, a young man with a sharp jawline and an even sharper tongue, crossed his arms over his chest and smirked. "Look, buddy," he said loudly, drawing the attention of nearby customers. "This isn't a shelter. We don't give out freebies to folks who can't pay. If you don't have money, you can't stay." The man's cheeks flushed a deep crimson as he took a step back. "I wasn't asking for a free drink," he murmured. "Just a place to stay dry for a bit." A snide chuckle rose from a table nearby where a group of well-dressed patrons sat observing the scene. "Imagine that," one of them sneered, "coming into a cafe without a dime and expecting to be served. Some people have no shame." The man's shoulders hunched as he turned toward the door, the weight of humiliation pressing heavily upon him. From across the room, Emma, a 29-year-old waitress with auburn hair pulled into a loose ponytail, observed the exchange. Her hazel eyes, usually warm and inviting, now burned with indignation. Balancing a tray laden with empty cups and plates, she navigated through the crowded cafe toward the counter. Setting the tray down with a decisive clatter, she reached into the pocket of her modest uniform and retrieved a $5 bill, placing it firmly on the counter. "That's enough," she said, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the murmurs that had begun to spread. The barista's smirk faltered as he looked at her. "Emma, what are you doing?" he scoffed. "You don't have to pay for this guy." Emma's gaze swept over the assembled patrons, her expression unwavering. "I'm covering his coffee," she stated, "not out of pity, but because I know what it's like to be judged for not having enough." A derisive laugh erupted from the corner of the room. "How noble! A waitress playing the hero." Emma turned to face the room, her posture erect and her voice resonant with conviction. "Kindness isn't a transaction," she declared. "It doesn't diminish us to show compassion, but belittling others, that reveals true smallness." The cafe fell silent, the previous undercurrent of mockery replaced by a palpable sense of introspection. Emma turned back to the man, offering him a gentle smile. "Please have a seat," she invited. "I'll bring your coffee over shortly. Don't let the harsh words of others define your worth." The man met her gaze, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He nodded appreciatively and found a seat by the window where the rain continued to cascade down the glass. The moment in the cafe still echoed in Emma's mind as she cleared the last table of her shift. The next morning, her manager, Brian, called her into the office. "This is a business, Emma, not your charity project," he said. "You don't get to decide who gets freebies." "I paid for it," she said calmly. "That's not the point," he snapped. "You embarrassed your coworker and made customers uncomfortable." Emma looked him in the eye. "No, he embarrassed himself." "Don't test me," Brian said sharply. "Remember your place." Back in the kitchen, Marcy muttered just loud enough, "Must be nice, acting noble when you still split rent with your kid's sister." Emma said nothing. She grabbed her coat, signed out, and stepped into the drizzle outside. The apartment she shared with Lily was cramped, a one-bedroom with peeling paint and a drafty window. Lily lay curled on the couch, shivering under a blanket. "Hey," Emma whispered, brushing her sister's forehead. She reheated old porridge and handed it to her sister. Then she checked her wallet. $3, one subway token, a faded photo of their mom. She looked at the money, folded it slowly, and slid it back in. No regret. Not for the coffee, not for anything. After Lily drifted to sleep, Emma sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Her thoughts slipped back to years ago when their mother collapsed in a street market. People had passed without stopping. All but one, an old woman in a patched skirt, had knelt beside them, offering water and wrapping a shawl around Emma's shoulders. Emma never knew her name, but she remembered her kindness. That moment became a promise.so when she saw that man in the cafe, wet, ashamed, invisible. There was no decision to make. She did what needed to be done. Before turning off the light, she whispered into the dark, "I'd rather be mocked for doing the right thing than praised for staying silent." It had been 4 days since the incident. That morning, the cafe hummed as usual. Emma moved from table to table, wiping crumbs, stacking plates, offering polite smiles. Then the doorbell chimed. A tall man entered, dressed in a charcoal suit and silk scarf, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed. His polished shoes tapped lightly across the floor. He looked like a man who belonged in a glass tower, not this modest cafe. But there was something unmistakable in his eyes. Emma froze. He didn't go to the counter. He walked to the table by the window, the same seat where a soaked, humiliated man had once sat, and took it without a word. Emma approached with a menu, unsure whether to act like she didn't know or to speak the truth aloud. Before she could say anything, he looked up. "I'm not here to order," he said. "I only have one question. Why did you help me?" Emma blinked. I just couldn't watch it happen. You didn't know me. You had nothing to gain." She hesitated. "You didn't look like someone asking for a handout. You looked like someone being made to feel small. And I know that feeling." She sat down across from him. "When I was 17, she said, "my mom collapsed in a market. No one helped. They walked around her like she was a problem, except one woman, an old lady with barely anything herself. She stayed. And I promised I'd be like her if I ever got the chance." He didn't interrupt. He just listened. "That day," she said softly, "I remembered that promise." A few beats of silence passed. Then he asked, "Do you read?" Emma blinked. "Books?" He nodded. "I used to. Not much lately. I like stories about ordinary people doing brave things." They started talking about books, cities, music. Why people grow cruel when they feel powerless. Minutes passed, then more. The cafe noise faded into background hum. At one point, Emma really laughed for the first time in days. "You're not what I expected," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She shrugged. "Someone who just wanted to say thank you and disappear." He looked down, then met her eyes again. "I've had wealth for a long time," he said. "But very few people have made me feel human again that day." "You did." Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. In that moment, they were just two people. Not a waitress and a billionaire, not a stranger and a savior, just two souls finally seen. It was exactly 1 week later when Emma received the envelope. There was no return address, just a heavy ivory card inside embossed with gold lettering, the Inspirational, a 5-star hotel in the heart of the city. Her name was printed clearly at the top, Emma Eld Bennett, guest of Charles H. Everlyn. She almost didn't go, but curiosity led her to the hotel lobby 3 days later. When she stepped through the revolving doors, it felt like entering another world. Polished marble floors, chandeliers dripping with light. The concierge directed her to a private lounge on the 21st floor. The lounge was quiet, opulent. She stood by the window until the door behind her opened. Charles walked in with the kind of authority that didn't demand attention, it simply was. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth, low. "Thank you for coming." He gestured toward the table. "Please, sit." He sat across from her, folding his hands. "I wanted to tell you in person," he began. "My name is Charles H. Everlyn. I'm the founder of Everlyn Holdings. We operate in 12 countries, primarily in infrastructure and social impact investing." Emma blinked. "I wasn't pretending to be someone else," he added quickly. "But that morning at the cafe, I dressed down. I didn't bring my wallet on purpose. I needed to know, what would people see when there was nothing to gain? My wife passed away 15 years ago, he continued, his voice quieter. Cancer. Sudden. After she died, I stopped trusting people, stopped believing kindness was real. I began traveling anonymously, visiting cities, towns, not just to see the world, but to see who still lived with heart in it. He looked at her directly. That day, I found someone. Emma's throat tightened. You set me up, she asked, voice shaking slightly. No, he said gently. I didn't approach you. I didn't ask for anything. I simply watched. And you chose. She shook her head slowly. I don't know whether to feel grateful or manipulated. He nodded. I understand that. Emma stood abruptly. So what now? She asked. You tell me I passed your little morality test and then what? You write me a check? I offer you nothing unless you choose to hear me out. He stood too, walked to the window. I wasn't testing you, Emma, he said. I was searching. Searching for something I thought the world had lost. And maybe someone to remind me what it meant to be seen. Not as a billionaire, not as a burden, just as a man. I don't want to buy your gratitude, he added. But I'd like to know, would you have a coffee with me again? No expectations, no pretenses. Emma looked at him, not at the tailored suit, the luxury lounge, the skyline, but at his eyes. The same eyes that had looked down, wet with shame, clutching a tattered coat. She let out a slow breath. I don't know what this is, she said softly. Or what you think it could be. But I know who I am. And who is that? He asked. She smiled. Someone who didn't do it to be noticed, and someone who's not afraid to walk away if that's all this turns out to be. He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. That's what makes you different. Emma didn't expect to hear from Charles again. But the very next afternoon, another envelope arrived. Inside was a short note. Emma, I'm traveling to Montreal next week. I'd like you to come. Not for business, not for formality, just company, just conversation. No expectations, only a sincere invitation. Charles. There was a round-trip train ticket tucked inside. Later that night, Emma told Lily everything about the invitation. I'm not sure I belong in his world, she said. What if I embarrass myself? Lily studied her for a moment. You've spent your whole life making space for others. Maybe it's time you see what space looks like when someone makes it for you. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She thought of the café, the way people had laughed. She thought of Charles's eyes, humble, searching, human. And she thought of her mother who used to say, don't wait for life to come get you. Sometimes you've got to go find it yourself. By sunrise, her decision was made. At the train station, she stepped onto the platform with her heart caught somewhere between hesitation and hope. Charles was waiting in the cabin. No bodyguards, no fanfare, just him, seated by the window, a book in his lap, and 2 coffees on the table. He looked up when she entered and smiled. I didn't think you'd come, he said. Emma sat down across from him. I didn't think I would either, she replied. But then I remembered, the world doesn't change unless you walk into it. He nodded thoughtfully. I'm not offering anything, he said. No promises, no paths paved in gold. I just thought maybe it's time I stopped walking alone. Emma looked out the window as the city began to blur. She turned back to him. Maybe, she said, we both needed someone to remind us we're still allowed to choose something different. The days that followed were unlike anything Emma had ever known. No 5-star hotels, no yachts. Instead, she found herself waking up in quiet villages and dusty towns, in modest guest houses, riding in the back of Charles's old Jeep with the windows down. They visited orphanages where children rushed into Charles's arms shouting his name. Not because he gave them toys, but because he remembered birthdays, favorite books, inside jokes. They went to shelters where Charles spoke little but listened deeply. They sat on porches of homes half built by hands he'd funded but never named. Emma watched all of this in quiet awe. He never announced himself, never sought praise. She asked him once while sorting boxes at a community food pantry, why don't you tell people who you are? He shrugged. Because they'd stop talking to me like I'm human. One night in a cabin in Quebec, they sat on the porch as the crickets sang. Charles had brewed chamomile tea. They hadn't spoken in a while, but it wasn't silence born of awkwardness. Finally, Charles leaned back, looking out into the dark. "I've had people offer me everything," he said. "But I don't need someone to love me. I need someone who understands why I love the things I do. Someone who doesn't need to be dazzled, just present." Emma didn't answer right away. Then she looked at him. "I don't know if I'm that person," she said honestly. "But I do know this. I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you." Charles didn't smile. He simply looked peaceful, as if he'd just heard the answer he didn't know he'd been waiting for. Later that night, Emma sat by the cabin window, writing in her journal. Quiet. Found. Seen. She closed the book and whispered into the stillness, "I didn't come looking for love, but maybe I stumbled into something braver." 3 months. 3 months of quiet mornings and unhurried conversations. Emma had changed, but not in the way most people might expect. She wasn't wealthier. She didn't dress differently. But her spirit, that had shifted. She walked straighter, spoke more slowly, felt no need to explain her worth to anyone anymore. They had just returned from a visit to a women's shelter when Charles asked to speak with her privately. They sat on the rooftop terrace of a converted church they were funding. He handed her a simple folder. Inside were the legal documents to establish a foundation in her name, the Emma Bennett Opportunity Fund. "I want to leave something behind," he said. "But not in my name. I want the next girl, the one waiting tables, taking care of her sister, thinking no one sees her. I want her to know someone did." Emma said nothing. "Not yet. You don't have to run it. You don't even have to be involved. But it will exist because you did." Emma placed the folder on the table gently. "I'm honored," she said. "More than I can express. But if it's all right, I'd like to try something else." He nodded, encouraging. "I want to build something on my own," she said. "Not because I don't value what you're offering, but because someone once believed in me enough to let me believe in myself. And I want to offer that same belief to others. Not through money, but through presence, through listening, through being there when no one else shows up." Charles was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, not with surprise, but with quiet, radiant pride. "You already have," he said. Emma looked at him, at the man who had once sat trembling in a café, only to become her mirror, her mentor, her friend. There was no label for what they were. Not lovers, not partners, not quite family, but something more enduring. A kind of soul recognition. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "No matter what you do," he said softly, "I'll be in your corner. Always." She nodded, her eyes glistening. They sat there until the sun dipped below the horizon. Their story had never been about grand declarations. It was built on quiet choices, patient belief, and the courage to let each other go, not out of loss, but out of trust. The rain had returned, soft and steady, as the final letters were pressed onto the cafe window, the first cup. Emma stood across the street with an umbrella in hand, watching as her vision became real. This wasn't just a cafe. It was the cafe. The one where everything began. She had rebuilt it from scratch, painted the walls, refinished the floors. With the help of volunteers, small donors, and quiet encouragement from someone who never asked for recognition. Etched beneath the glass logo was the motto, "No one should have to earn kindness." Inside, the cafe glowed with life. A chalkboard near the counter didn't list prices. It read, "Your first cup is on us, your second, if you can, on someone else." Emma stood near the window, watching the flow of humanity. A space for rest, for dignity. Then the door opened. A man stepped inside. Older, hunched, soaked from the rain. His hands trembled. He looked uncertain, almost apologetic. A young barista stepped forward. "Sir, this place is for customers only." Emma crossed the room before he could finish, laying a gentle hand on the barista's shoulder. "It's all right," she said, then turned to the man. "Would you like a seat by the window?" He nodded gratefully. "And what would you like today?" "Just something warm," he murmured. "To sit for a bit. It's been a long morning." Emma's voice softened. Then let's make it longer with a little peace. She glanced at the barista. Here, the first cup is always on us. No questions, no shame. As she headed to the back, something tugged at her. She turned to the window, and there he was. Charles, standing across the street under a black umbrella, his coat collar pulled up, his face calm, eyes warm, but he didn't wave, didn't come inside. Just watched. She met his gaze, and in that silent moment, something passed between them. Gratitude. Farewell. And something else, a promise. He nodded once, then turned and vanished into the rain. Later, during the soft opening, Emma stood beside the piano with a microphone in hand. She looked around the cafe, every seat filled, the air thick with comfort. Years ago, she began, I paid for someone's coffee. I didn't know who he was. I just saw someone being made small, and I couldn't look away. That cup cost me $5, but what it gave me was a new way to see the world. Some nodded, others wiped their eyes. I thought I was helping a man who was lost, she said. But it turns out he helped me find the version of myself I didn't know I was allowed to become. She set the cup down. This cafe isn't about selling coffee. It's about presence. About showing up when no one else does. Her voice grew softer. A man once told me, kindness doesn't need to be remembered. It only needs to be continued. So that's what we're doing here. One cup at a time. And almost as an afterthought, she added, some loves don't need romance. Some lives change with nothing more than a kind gesture and the courage to mean it. The room applauded. A saxophone began to play, and somewhere in the back, a first cup was poured for someone who didn't know they needed it until they did, and so it began again.